So just an example, there's a JLabel field called login message label. I can choose to inspect that again. Remember, you can only change and view primitive types, so it's a complex object. You have to inspect that and then try and change any of the primitive fields. This has a text property, welcome Bob. So we can change this. And if we redraw the GUI, it's changed, right? So JOI will let us change any arbitrary fields anywhere on this client form. But we're still a bit restricted. We can't call methods. We can only change fields. So it's not the full show. If you wanted that, we just need to log into our Bean Shell instance. Remember, Bean Shell has now started up 2 servers running inside this application. It's running on it's running a telnet server, and it's running this HTTP server over here. Remember, we gave the reference to client form and called it form. So if I print form, there is an object called form in reference here. So I can print form dot. So we have access to that field as well. Okay. So far so good, but the interesting stuff is going to be in this EJB method, or the EJB class. View orders. Remember, view orders exposes all of this functionality. So the first thing, I'll just get a reference to view orders. That's going to be form.viewOrders. And remember, view orders is private. The only reason I can access it here is because I set accessibility to true on the Bean Shell. So we have access to that EJB. Let's try something like ejb.login. Nonsense. So a failed login returns null. And successful login returns the account ID by the looks of things. All right. Well, now we're in a position to try a bit of SQL injection. Blank password. And it happens to work. So this only works because the validation, the input validation of these values is being done on the client and not on the server side. So this is a misarchitecture of the application. All this security components, the input validation and so on, this really must be implemented on the server side and not like it's done here on the client. So while we're doing this, we may as well do something like brute force usernames. This is Bean Shell scripting, reading a number of passwords from a dictionary. No, a number of usernames from a dictionary file. Right, this is all pretty familiar Java stuff. Try and log in using our SQL injection with the given username. If it succeeds, add it to an array. And pretty easy to call scripts that you've written with the Bean Shell, like so. And it will run through the script and find the examples. Yeah. So, sorry, actually, can we wait till the end? Because I'm running a bit tight on time. Thanks. Okay, and then of course the key that we wanted to test was access control. Can Bob view Alice's orders, right? So if we look at the GUI, Bob can view 001, 007. He can't view 002. So that's the first thing we'll try here is O equals, now the reason I know this is because we can see the methods on this interface here, so we know what we're going to call get order with an integer, right? So we're just going to try different integers. So pretty simple, ejb.get order 1002. Okay, there is an object there, and we can inspect the fields on that order class, build to first name. Belongs to Alice. Right. So again, a misarchitecture of the application. The state is being stored on the client side, and just because the GUI is in the way, there's a false sense of security that you can't actually view other people's orders. But on the server side, if you can call those methods directly, you can view those orders. Right. Now, once you've explored the application with the Bean shell, perhaps what you want to do is override or overwrite methods completely with aspect J. And this means that you will permanently change this jar file to behave as you want. And I'll be using a new type of advice here called around advice. Now, around advice is different to before or after in that you can optionally choose to ignore the original method. So if you wanted to, you can run something, you can run some around advice which executes before, it then calls the original method and then executes something after. Or you can just overwrite the method completely. So going back to that login functionality, this was the trace of what happens during login, right? This was using aspect-J to do the tracing. And this is what came out. Client form.login calls the server side login. It then sets the account ID. It does a comparison, and then it exits and returns a Boolean, right? So if we wanted to rewrite this method, what we could do is just ignore the server side, set the account ID directly, and then just return true at the end. Okay? And that's what we can do here with aspect-J. Just get rid of this code for now. So we define the point cut. The point cut is going to match exactly our client form.login method with 2 strings as an argument. Conceptually, all we want to do is form.accountID is the account ID and then return true. But we can't do that because account ID is a private field. So all this code is really just to use reflection to get a hold of the class, to get a hold of the field, turn accessibility to true again so that we can access private fields, and then set the value on the field. Just a longhand version of doing this effectively. Okay. So we apply that advice. Oops. Done. Advice applied. We now run with the advice. And now we've patched the login method. Doesn't matter who we log in as. It's going to log us in as Bob because we've set the account ID manually to Bob's ID. And we can view Bob's orders. Right. Just to give you an idea of what you can do with aspect-J from this a practical point of view, it was a bit pointless because we had to know Bob's account ID in the first place, right? So if we wanted to test something like the access control, if we wanted to test whether Bob can view Alice's orders, what we really wanted to do is to be able to set that list box and insert the order numbers into that list box. And we can do that too. So we define a new point cut. Let me just show you what that trace looks like to refresh your memory. Populate order list. This is the method that was populating the order list, right? So it called the server side, get order IDs that returned a list. It converted the list to an array, and then it set list data using that array. And that was the end of it. So we can do the same thing. We just won't call the server side. We'll just create our own array, right? And that's what this code does. Again, have to use reflection because order list box is a private field on form, so we can't access it normally. So have to use reflection, have to turn accessibility to true, and then eventually we can access it. So I create my own array here, 1001, 1002, 1003. That should belong to Alice. These two should belong to Alice, right? Login needs to be a whole lot simpler. We just need to return true. Since we're not using the account ID, we just needed to log us into the GUI, right? Actually, it doesn't matter who we log in as, right? It returns the orders that we placed in it. So we've permanently patched the application to behave as we like by using AspectJ. So basically, what I've demonstrated is that you have a lot of power using simple open source developer tools. You don't need to understand the bytecode, and you can override and overwrite client-side Java code. You can trace application flow using AspectJ and Eclipse TPTP. You can get UML2 diagrams right out of Eclipse TPTP to try and understand execution flow. And then you can manipulate the final client either permanently using AspectJ or insert a bean shell or insert a JOI so that you can play around interactively and find out what's going on inside that application. I want to close with a mention of Arshan's talk, which is happening in the Neapolitan room in just a few minutes. Now, I didn't mention Java Snoop because it hasn't been released yet. It will be released in a few minutes. And it's really a GUI that makes a lot of the bean shell, the functionality that I took out of the bean shell, you will get with Java Snoop. It's an easy-to-use GUI application. You don't need to inject anything. It will automatically let you select from a list of running Java processes, select the process, and you can then intercept method calls, you can set fields, you can do all sorts of fancy stuff with it. So recommend you attend this talk if you're interested in the subject. Yes, there were questions. Sorry?